Hey, this is the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm Sal Interdonado, and I'm here with Connor Crean of Barstool Sports and James from Brigade Review and As for Football. And we're going to talk about the latest with Army Coach Jeff Monken and Kansas, and the possible marriage between those two, and what the future might look for the Army football program. Guys, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Sal.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I guess we can just first start off with what we know right now. What we know right now is Jeff Monken's been reportedly one of the finalists, you could say, for the Kansas job. From what we know at this moment, it looks like him and Lance Leopold of Buffalo are the finalists. There's stuff out there on Twitter. I think it might be a little bit from the Kansas Jayhawk Nation about, an interview of Jeff Monken, a deal with Jeff Monken securing between Jeff Monken and Kansas, but nothing's been officially announced. I haven't seen any of the national media break that news yet. From what I'm told, there's interest there, and it's real. And Monken's assembling a staff to prepare if the job is offered to him. So right there, we could start there, guys. Just kind of what are your thoughts on that right now? I know that Jeff Monken, from what he's done at Army for the last 7 years, you have to put him right up there as one of the best coaches that West Point's had for the football program. I mean, what do you go back to Red Blake, right? I mean, and what Jeff Monken has done, and just kind of how you guys feel about right now where the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprised to hear his name mentioned every year for the last 3 years. To get brought up as a potential candidate for this job, for that job. It's very clear that he's a very good coach. To go into a program like Army and turn around the program is no small feat. What he was able to do to change the entire culture, to win at the level that he's been able to win, to beat the teams he's been able to beat, and to go toe-to-toe with some of the premier teams in the country. So it's not surprising when and I apologize for that car alarm. It's not surprising when his name gets brought up. And honestly, I think he would be doing a disservice to himself to not entertain these offers, because, it's important to know your worth. And we can't be so naive to think that this isn't a business. And, Coach Monken is in this to win football games and to do right by West Point. But he also, is a football coach that needs to know what he's worth. And I'd imagine his agent, whomever that might be, would probably utilize this in future negotiations when talking about contracts. So it's not surprising. I think it's flattering for Coach Monken. It's understandable. Certainly we don't want to lose him because, as you mentioned, Sal, he's right up there in the pantheon of all-time great Army coaches already. So hopefully it doesn't pan out that way for him, that he leaves us.
James, your thoughts?
Yeah, and as you sort of alluded to, Sal, let's all kind of take a breath and pump the brakes here. Not one person with an editor has broken the story, right? The most legitimate person that has tweeted about this is a couple SB Nation guys on their personal Twitter pages. So these are a bunch of schmucks like us who happen to root for Kansas instead of Army. So let's all take a deep breath. So that's first and foremost. In terms of, if Monken leaves tomorrow, and we'll likely find out tomorrow because that's when the rumored press conference would be, or announcement from Kansas would be. First and foremost, we've talked about this over on the Ask for Football podcast quite a bit, but he was the first coach in a long time that came into Army and said, we're not going to win football games despite being Army. We're going to win football games because we're Army. And that culture that he created for the Army football team was clearly a successful one. And it was something players could get behind, and the results show. So,
yeah. And what's funny? I think it's just as a fan base, this is the first time we've ever had a coach that's been desired elsewhere. So this is new territory. It's like, hey, when you have a really good coach, because, for me, I look at Kansas as a step down quite honestly. I get that it's the Big 12. Great. I know that's a real big-time conference. Cool. But to go be middle of the pack at Kansas, is that better than, winning the CIC and playing in one of the preeminent football games every season? Is that, I don't think those two compare. So it's just funny. I think when you have a good coach, as we've had now for the last few years, this is just something that we would need to get used to. And the other thing, again, it goes back to it is a money thing. This is the nature of college football. It is a money thing. And when you see your coach continue to get courted, that is discussed when you talk about not only him, but all of his assistants and what their salaries are, because these guys have families too. And save for Mike Vitti, these guys don't have, huge ties to West Point. They're here because they were hired to coach here. And I love our coaching staff, and I think they do a phenomenal job. And I think a lot of them love West Point and want to stay here. But these things have to be considered. And we're lucky to have, I think this is a good problem to have.
Who was the coach in the 90s that won 5 in a row against
Bob
Navy?
Sutton?
Yeah, he was the last coach that you could, in terms of Service Academy success, could put on the level of Jeff Monken, and he got fired in Philadelphia after an Army Navy game. So, you're right. This is the first time, at least in any of our lifetimes, that an Army coach has been desired elsewhere, and it's a weird feeling. And we can get into the merits of the Kansas program versus the Army program and that sort of thing. And if we want to, we can do that. I mean, what jumps out at me is that Les Miles was making marginally more than Ken Niumatalolo was last year, or at least from supposed reports. So maybe it's really not that much of a money thing. And if it is, it'd be interesting to see those numbers. I know they're all private, but I can't see that it's that much of a money thing. And it's also not considered. I wouldn't consider it unreasonable to think that Jeff Monken would make more than Les Miles at Kansas, but who knows?
I think right now I look at it. It's the right time for Monken, but it's the wrong time for Army. That's what I was thinking when this news is coming down today. Because he's been in the running for other Power 5 jobs. I mean, he was really seriously considered for Vanderbilt before they hired Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. And I look at it as May. Now we're very close to May. This is not the opportune time for a head coach to leave the program. And then where do you go from here? It's tough on the program. It's tough on the players. It's tough on the commits. It's tough on the recruits. And, like I said, I mean, he's earned, and Connor, you said this, what his resume at West Point is deserving of being considered for Power 5 jobs. And I'm surprised he didn't land one after the 11-win season.
Yeah, it's crazy to me, and obviously I'm biased, but it's crazy to me how any Power 5 job is just held at this high level as if there aren't bottom of the barrel Power 5 jobs, which is exactly what Kansas is. That's a bottom of the barrel. It's not a football school. It's through and through. It's a blue blood basketball school. That they do not. They've had a little bit of success in the last few decades, but nothing of real note to where you would think like, oh, all right, maybe I would want to go there. I guess maybe as an ego check, hey, can I go turn around another program? I don't know, but is winning 6 games in a Power 5 conference for a competitive person, is that as enjoyable as winning 10, 11, 12, maybe 12 games and a CIC? I don't know. That's a personal thing that I won't pretend to answer for Coach, but I don't see the appeal.
This is a program that has that hasn't won more than one game since 2008.
You're kidding me.
No,
that's the last time Kansas won more than one game.
I didn't realize it was even that abysmal. Why? I mean,
I'm sorry. Those are conference games.
Okay,
but still,
that competitiveness in your conference.
The Big 12, and let's talk about this for a second. The type of kid you're recruiting to play in the Big 12 is different than the type of kid you're recruiting to play at West Point. Agreed? Now, his brand of coaching, for all intents and purposes, is old school in a lot of ways. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I don't know that a Big 12 type player, if that's going to resonate with a kid in the Big 12 as well as it does with a kid at West Point.
Yeah, and further in Kansas, 2008 was also the last time they had a winning record. Period.
Yeah, so not a football school.
No, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter make that argument. You know, is it really a step up? And I think, again, as you said, if it comes down to money, it comes down to money, and the business is business. But unless Kansas is going to shell out a lot more money than they did for Les Miles, a name brand coach,
right?
You know, why is this a money issue?
Right.
I mean, so, and we'll take this back, you know, obviously we've never experienced anything like this before. You know, in terms of other service academies, Navy lost Paul Johnson to Georgia Tech, but there was a night, and this goes back to, hey, nothing in the press yet, right? There was a Tuesday night in December 2015, where everyone at all three service academies and across the country thought that Ken Niumatalolo was going to be the next football coach of Brigham Young, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened the next day? It wasn't it? And that was all over the press. It was presumed to be true, and nothing happened. So that goes back to pump the brakes a little bit. But I think he realized, hey, is BYU really a step up? You know, he had sort of personal ties there with religious conviction, so that's sort of a different story. But is it really a step up to go be an independent in Utah instead of being, you know, in the American, or I don't know if it was the Big East back then or the American or what they were planning on joining at the time. I guess it was the American by then. But is it really a step up? And you know what Navy did? They turned around and they said, you know what, $3 million is what we'll pay you. And so they upped the ante, and we'll see if something similar happens here, if that's even what's on the table. So
yeah, I mean, I certainly don't know the particulars. You know, and I guess because maybe I just hold coach in such a high regard that I would like to think that it wouldn't just be a money thing. You know, maybe there have been other parts of the deal that have been offered to him that make it a little bit more appealing. But I think he's more of a man of principle. And again, I don't sit and have dinner with coach every night and talk personal.
I wish
things.
I did. You're right.
I wish I did, but you know, I think higher of him than to think something like this would happen. Sal, as you mentioned, at this time of the year, like if you were to have left for Vanderbilt when that whole thing was going down in the winter, that makes more sense. I just have, knowing him the very little bit that I do, he doesn't strike me as the type of guy who in May would say, all right, see you guys later and figure yourselves out. But then that goes to another point in terms of, if it were to happen, who do you bring in? Do you bring somebody from the outside, or do you stay within? So that's a whole other discussion for another time.
And even like, let's talk about money for a second. Like, even if it's about money per year, right? How long do you think Jeff Monken's going to be the coach of Kansas? If they go 6-6, how long is he be the head coach of Kansas? Jeff Monken can be Army's head coach for the next 20 years if he wants to. He'll have a damn bronze statue outside Mikey. So is it really more money if you're going to get fired from Kansas in a few years? And this isn't a Monken specific thing. This is any coach. If you're successful where you are and you're going to go to a perennial loser in the Big 12, is that really a money boost? I mean, over the next 4 or 5 years, sure. But beyond that, I'm not sure the money really makes sense there. Maybe he's going to leave for a different reason because of the money. Again, we're not Jeff Monken, but just more to think about.
Yeah, I just think it's more prestigious because realistically, is Kansas going to challenge for the Big 12 title anytime soon? Probably not. Now, I don't know that you could put Nick Saban in there and have that happen. I just think they're that poor of a program. So would you rather, maybe go, win 6 to 8 games and be kind of middle of the level in the Big 12? Or would you rather get Army to 20 CICs and be remembered forever as one of the greatest coaches in Army history, and also cement your legacy, not just at Army, but one of the greatest coaches in college football, the man who turned around Army and then made it something to be respected all over the country.
Yeah. And remember how the Big 12 works, right? So there are 8 teams, they round robin, and the top 2 go to the championship game. So it's not that you have an off year where everyone in your division stinks and you can win the division and get to the championship game. Like, no, you're playing a round robin. You have to play everybody else, and you need to win out of those 7 games at least 5 in order to get to that championship game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's no easy task. And honestly, if you look around the country and you think about who are the coaches who could do it, yeah, he's absolutely on the short list of somebody who could alter their culture and turn their program around. I just think that's a very, very, very difficult task.
For anyone.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments here on the podcast, and maybe we can go through a few and see what you guys think. Connor, they want El Presidente to be a booster and give Jeff all the money.
That's not outside the realm of possibility. Dave likes to say he's an Army guy, so I don't know. Stay tuned.
And we have what is the attraction to Kansas? We've been kind of over that too.
Dorothy, I don't know.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't think off the top of my head. Where is the University of Kansas located in the state of Kansas?
It's Lawrenceville, right?
Lawrence, okay. Kansas, yeah, but I have no idea where it is.
Yeah, all right. So I've never been there. I can't imagine well, never mind.
Or Lawrence, Kansas, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another comment here. Do you think he was spooked by the honor code incident and old grad reaction to it? I would say no.
No, because he's a head coach. Guess what? If it's an honor code incident in Army, guess what? It's a drinking problem at Kansas. It's every college you go to, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. Yes, I think we have kids who are above the fray in a lot of regards, and you have to worry about them a lot less. But I think you're going to have problems like that with your team. If you show me a head coach who doesn't have some sort of off the field incident in a given year. At some point during his tenure, and I'll say you're a liar.
Yeah, James, you asked for a football hat on Army Athletic Director Mike Buddy last week, and I remember you guys asking about giving Monken a lifetime contract and if he would do it or not. And this is before kind of what's hitting us this week. Just talk us through that interview and what Mike Buddy had to say about Jeff Monken.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to that, definitely go do that because, we had a ton of fun making the podcast, and we hope that you guys have a ton of fun listening to it. But Mike Buddy was very gracious to come on the podcast, and we had a great time talking to him. He is an incredible human being. He said, our host, Jordan, asked, Kansas just extended Bill Self, their basketball coach, on a lifetime contract. Would you consider doing that with Jeff Monken? And he, without missing, before Jordan was done asking the question, he said 100% yes. And he goes, it's telling that in the middle of an FBI investigation without an athletic director, Kansas did this because colleges value stability so much. And he said absolutely he'd do it. And then, we mentioned these rumors. We said, we hear all the time that Monken's a candidate here or there. And, are we prepared for that? And I have the quote here for you. Mike Buddy said, if Coach Monken leaves tomorrow, we'll have a template in place to find his replacement. He talked a lot about how he finds coaches in general for all sports. And he left us with that. So,
and that's the other reason, if it does in fact come to fruition and he leaves, we're so blessed between Mr. Buddy and General Williams to have such great leadership at the school that I'm confident we would find somebody to come in and be the head coach. And I don't know that we would really miss a beat. We're really, really fortunate that we're also, going back to years past, different coaches, different athletic directors. And now we have all the pieces in place, superintendent, athletic director, coach, and that's a big difference maker. So it's very, very fortunate that we have great leadership in Mr. Buddy and General Williams.
And Mike Buddy again made it seem like he's there for the long haul as well. He really enjoys it. It's the right fit for him, and so I'm confident that he's there for all the right reasons. And I think his quote was, "If I need something done, I have a rabbit colony of colonels to help me." So I think we all quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, and something else I think that bears mentioning is what's the trajectory of Army's program right now? We have, we're coming up another CIC season. We have a lot of marquee games coming up. We have a huge renovation to Mikey Stadium, and I listened to that interview, James, and I thought Mr. Buddy made a great point that West Point can be that college football team for the New York City area, and there's no reason it can't be. And now you introduce a stadium with these luxury boxes, and you talk about somebody like a Dave Portnoy, people who have the means to sponsor these types of boxes and want to get involved in a college program. So all these things considered, Army's going like this right now. And I'm not trying to like dump on Kansas, but what's the upside of Kansas there? Other than, hey, if I go there and turn them around, then everyone continues to tell me, that I'm great, because he is a great coach. But I don't see what the other upside is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I'm like dumping on this other opportunity, kind of like manifested that he doesn't go anywhere. But
we just got a comment, which is a good one. How many other impactful coaches run the triple option? And that's a big distinction, right? So let's assume for a second that Kansas is going to announce that Jeff Monken is their head coach tomorrow. So that assumption aside, when we hired Jeff Monken, we fired our coach because we wanted him, right? Like he was the clear and obvious choice to be the next head coach of Army. Mm-hmm. That choice isn't out there right now, right? We know that there's a contingency plan in effect, but when Boo Corrigan brought in Jeff Monken, it was obvious that he was doing it, right? And there weren't any questions. The questions now are, number one, who's the interim head coach? What are we doing for the next, for the remainder of the spring, whatever the spring game's coming up, and the summer training? And then number two, who's head coach on game one if it's not the same interim head coach? Because that question is definitely not obvious where it was when Monken started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have great leadership in terms of the coaching staff. So I think whoever the interim would be a good fit. I don't want to start throwing out names because I don't want to speculate anything, but I think I don't know that you go with an interim and then there's somebody else out there, as you mentioned, James, who would be better than what would our interim be. So why wouldn't we just stick with who we have? Because I think the gentleman on the staff right now, if we put one of them in place as the head coach, I think that'd be a good plan.
It's continuity too, right? It's continuity. It keeps your schemes in line. It also keeps your recruits and your commits in line also.
Yeah. Not to mention the learning curve. If you're coming off the street and you know nothing about West Point and your first summer is, wait, I don't get to have my guys here 24/7 every day because they have to go do this training over here. That's a huge learning curve for a college football coach.
Yeah, and Connor, you talked about the upside of West Point, and this is going to be a talented team coming back too. I mean, most of the starters are back on this team from a 9-3 team, and a team that took Cincinnati to the fourth quarter, a team that nearly beat West Virginia in the bowl game. I mean, those are West Virginia Power 5, Cincinnati top 10 team. I mean, this is a team that is primed for another successful season this year.
And that's the other thing, Sal. I think there's a little unfinished business with Coach Monken and Army, because we've been right there for the last few years beating a Power 5 school, and we've all watched it, and we're just, one or two things goes our way, and we got to win against one of these bigger schools. And I think that's something that you really hang your hat on, that not only did I turn this program around, but then I took my boys up against the so-called best in the country, and we beat them too.
And by the way, like, that's something that similar to Army, and I sort of see, because they had Nemo first. Navy did that a few times. Mm-hmm. They were on the doorstep. The best win they got was against an overranked Houston, right? Mm-hmm. An overrated Houston. And if he's the academy guy that can pull off a Power 5 top 10 win, he's got something on the other two academy coaches. Yes. I absolutely agree. Navy was a 2-point conversion away from sending Ohio State to overtime. And then a few years later, Army's in Norman and Ann Arbor actually in overtime. So there's that. And another shameless plug here for the As for Football. I had an article this week previewing a few of the games, including the Wisconsin game. possibilities there. Wisconsin was supposed to be an undefeated team last year, going into the Big Ten championship game. Why did they mess up? Because they had a lot of penalties and they love to put the ball on the turf and they threw interceptions. So that is a prime game for picking if you're an Army head coach and you want to pick off a Power 5 opponent.
Yeah, I just think you take a lot of pride in saying, hey, your kids are bigger and they're faster than our kids, but we're going to out-tough you and we're just going to beat you. We're going to put our hand in the dirt, and that's how we're going to beat you. I think there's something to be said for that versus, if you go win some games at a Big 12 school, like, okay, well, you should. You're getting Big 12 type recruits. Like, why aren't you winning? And then that's the other thing you kind of alluded to earlier too, James. I don't know how long his leash is at Kansas. A bunch of 6-win seasons, 7-win season. I don't know how long they put up with that. I feel like
I don't know. Kansas might put up with that for a long time.
Yeah,
now that
true.
I think about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. If they triple their conference wins each year, they're probably pretty happy.
Right. Yeah, and remember, we had another bunch of great comments here, but Monken had that big signature win in Gainesville against Florida when he was down at Georgia Southern, and he hasn't had that yet. His biggest
right. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So he must be hungry for it because he's had it before.
Yeah.
And he had it with a program that he brought to. I mean, he did that with an FCS program that he brought into FBS. So he knows that he's capable of doing it with Army. And I think he just. If I were him, I'd really want to do that.
Look at the Kansas fan chime in with they'll take a 3-win season at Kansas.
Yeah, seriously. I know. Listen, Kansas fans, I get it. I lived through it. I did it myself, so I know that what that pain feels like. But now I know what the other side feels like, and I don't want to lose that feeling. Not to say that if he leaves, we're all of a sudden going to start losing all our games. But it's a good thing we have here with Coach Monken. So why mess with a good thing?
No doubt. We like you said, James with the comments here. On Kansas football, we kind of wore that out a little bit. On the Kansas football side, some mentioning. I don't know if we want to get into this a little bit, but if Monken would to leave, who would he take? And there's a little bit of a fear that the defensive coordinator, Nate Woody, might go with him. And what Nate Woody did in one season as Army defensive coordinator was quite amazing during a pandemic year. And like we said before, a lot of that talent is back. And, they led the nation in total yardage allowed last year under Nate Woody in his first season. And, he certainly is, no doubt, proved to be an asset. So there's some concern over that if he were to leave, if who he takes with him, so to speak.
I will say that one of the most underappreciated aspects of Jeff Monken, and you hear it talked about sometimes, but it's not talked about in the bigger realm of college football, is his ability to bring in quality coaches, train them up, and turn them into, we saw this with Jay Bateman, he turned them into national brand coaches. And if he leaves, that is something that I think we'll miss. I don't know that. That was sort of something that we didn't expect from Coach Monken coming in, and now we sort of take it for granted. And it's a big question mark. Like, you could bring in the best coach in the world, but he might be awful at that. So
yeah, there's no coincidence that we've had a lot of assistant coaches poached in the last 5 years. Yeah. There's a reason for that. And again, I don't begrudge those guys for taking other opportunities. But James, there's a reason. He has an eye for talent when it comes to coaches, and I think molding them and teaching them what they need to do to be successful, and that shows.
James, great point, because you look at like a David Corley went to Penn State. They had a special teams coach go to Arkansas.
We had a coach or two go to Illinois this year.
Yeah, and Chad Wilt, who was a defensive line coach, went to Cincinnati, and now he's at Minnesota, I believe. So, there is that. But then you have the guys like a Tucker Waugh, who's been around the program. You're probably familiar with Tucker Waugh, Connor. Been around the program forever, and those guys he's a guy who 100%, bleeds the West Point black and gold. He's a guy who, if Coach Monken were to leave, that's a guy you definitely want to have on your staff who knows the academy, him and John Luce also, So I mean, a good point with the talent that Jeff Monken has had in the coaching staff too. So
yeah, and I mean, I think that's not to take any credit away from Coach Woody because he did a phenomenal job, but the fact that Coach Monken saw what he saw in Coach Woody to bring him in and do what he did in a year. Again, when we lost Coach Bateman, I was like, oof, that's going to be tough. And then, 2 years later, he brings in Coach Woody, and we have the number one defense in the country. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, it's so undervalued. I think in 20 years, we're going to be looking back and say, okay, we'll look at Nick Saban's coaching tree, and we'll look at, Urban Meyer's coaching tree, and then you're going to see a bunch of great coaches, and you're going to see Jeff Monken's coaching tree, and big-time college football fans that aren't familiar with service academies are going to say, who the hell is that? And why do they have such an impressive coaching tree?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's, go ahead, Connor.
I was going to say, I wonder, and this is just so outside the box here, and I recognize that, but I wonder how much social media had to play into this, right? Because how many clips in the last few years of Coach Monken have gone viral to where, right? Like, people don't pay attention. Most people, unless you're like a super diehard college football fans, don't really pay too much close attention to Army. How much quieter Coach Monken's success would have been if not for all those videos in the locker room and everyone sharing them and saying, oh man, I want to play for that guy. But just that's the type of thing when you go out to other schools and you're talking to your boosters and you're saying, we want to hire Jeff Monken. They're not saying, wait, who's Jeff Monken? They're like, oh yeah, that guy. I remember seeing his video. Yeah. And one video can be a difference maker for some of these people who are maybe just casual fans, but huge donors.
So I got a question for you. Other than Charlie Weiss and Les Miles, how many Kansas head coaches can you name?
Mangino, and that's probably the end of the list.
Yeah, well, I did look at a story the other day. So Turner Gill was also, I believe, a Kansas coach, the former Nebraska quarterback. I think he coached at Kansas too. I could be. Yeah. So
I pulled up the list. I knew the same three as you, Connor. That's it. So if it's an ego check thing, it's a really bad decision, I guess.
I won't pretend to be inside his head, but I don't get it.
Yeah.
That's the social
media. And there may be nothing to get, right?
Right. Right. So. We're all it's funny you mentioned Sal earlier, like people were talking like this is a done deal. According to whom? Like I think it's a done deal according to KU Football Insider 6832, who has 2 followers and thinks he's in the know, but in reality, as you mentioned, there's nobody of note that has made this official yet. So until I hear something like that, I'm concerned clearly, but I'm not ready.
I'm concerned. I won't be nervous until I see something written from somebody who has an editor who needs to provide sources.
Yes.
Like that will make me really nervous.
Yeah, I had a couple people like email me and say, why don't you have the news on Coach Monken going to Kansas? It's like, because I don't have any concrete sources telling me that he is going to Kansas. So just because you're right, just because a Kansas super fan or Kansas, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, the rivals, or they're reporting this. We all have our sources, and right now I don't have anybody telling me concrete. Yeah, he took an interview. We get it. He's again.
Ken Nemo. Nemo took an interview with BYU, and that, as we know, didn't happen. So, I'm a little nervous, but I'm not going to get worked up over it yet.
I'm really surprised maybe by. I was talking about this today about Kansas, right? The way they've approached this search and the way they've approached filling their AD position too. It was a little bit on the methodical side at first, right? It was a little slow pace, and now all of a sudden here we go. I mean, I don't see why can't, if Monken is the guy, hypothetically, can you let the guy coach in the black and gold game and then announce that he's your guy? I mean, that's just me personally speaking, but I mean, do you have to announce tomorrow? That's just a thought from me. They took their time. They were a little bit methodical in what they did with Lance Miles. The AD steps down. first you have to have an AD in place, right, to hire a head coach, and now yes, it's in full gear. And I don't know. I just you hear, okay, it's going to be the end of the week, right? Maybe, and now, or maybe even next week, and now you're hearing it's tomorrow might be the announcement. So I don't know. I just think that
You know what's interesting? I'm sorry. I just had this thought, and I need to interrupt. I apologize, Sal, but
No.
It's funny. Like, we're talking about how difficult it would be for a coach to come into West Point in May and be ready for the season. Wouldn't that be equally difficult for Coach Monken to go to Kansas in May and get ready for a season?
Yeah, it would be. That I guess that's why you hear about he has his coaching staff in place. I think, not to be naive at all, but he's had his name out there, right, for other positions. He probably has a game plan and what he wants to do at a Power 5 school already, written down or somewhere in place. So it would be pretty difficult. Like, I don't think Kansas fans, I mean, can Monken in a couple months turn Kansas right off the gate and go 3-0 to start the season? I haven't looked at their schedule, but I mean, you're right. There's a difficulty level there too. So.
Yeah, and you're not bringing anybody. Whoever you got right now at Kansas is who you got. You can't bring in anybody new at this point. So that would, I don't know. He Coach Monken just strikes me as a little smarter than going somewhere at this point. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this pretty extensively. Is there anything else you guys want to add, or is there anything else you would like to talk about with the latest?
Here's the last thing I'll say. I mean, so long as we keep having 8 to 12 win seasons, his name's going to get brought up. So I guess we're going to have to get used to it. I just don't know how often his name is going to get brought up where it's going to be a scenario that I believe is a step up for him and seen as something where it would be a good move for him versus just sticking with us until he's 90 years old. Like eventually the guy is going to no longer coach. He's going to have to retire at some point. So we will have to face facts that he will leave us at some point, and we'll deal with that. But I just hope it's not this year.
James, you have anything to add?
Number one, I hope that if this is as true as some of the rumors say it is, that Mike Buddy is doing his best to keep him here, and I'm sure that he is. And then number two, let's all take a breath. Again, like we might find out tomorrow that Lance Leopold is the next coach of Kansas football, and this is all a ploy by the Kansas AD to make people happy with the Lance Leopold hire because people don't want to have the option. So, take a breath. He's his own man. He can explore his options, and a smart man would. So taking an interview is taking an interview. A lot of people would do that. So he's exploring his options. That's all we know at this point. He took an interview. He has an agent. That's what anyone would do in this situation. It's what other service academy coaches have done in the past. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to plug your social medias or where people can find you?
Yeah, I'm at Captain Cons everywhere. And as Sal mentioned, I co-host Zero Blog 30, the military podcast over at Barstool Sports.
Cool. I'm at Brigade_review, and I'm with all the As for Football guys. I'm with them now and having a blast. So As for Football on Twitter, asforfootball.com. I do a lot of writing with them, and we have our podcast, which you can find anywhere. So.
And please feel free to subscribe to Black Knight Nation on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and check out our YouTube page, blackknightnation.com. Like I said, when I have something concrete, it'll be up. Right now we're just there's a lot of noise out there, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. But James and Connor, really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to give James and his As for Football crew a little credit for something. Mm-hmm. that you guys posted a tweet that's like, hey, we'll post something when it's officially official, because I think there are certain outlets that people go to for their Army football news, and when you post something that ultimately might turn out to not be true, you get people spun up into a frenzy, and that's not nice to do to people's emotions. So don't do that.
That's what Kansas is doing right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, again, we're not breaking news over at As for Football. We're offering our thoughts, our unsolicited opinions, and we hope you enjoy them. So if you want them, head over there, but we're not going to try to break news or scoop you. So
yep.
And shout out to Dan at As for Football for a little bit of a Twitter thread or rant tonight before we came on. So thanks a lot, guys. Again, we'll be once there is something official, we'll definitely be back here and talk about it. So you guys have a great night.
Thanks, Sal. Thanks, James.
Thanks for having us, Sal. See you, Connor.